The UN has confirmed what many feared was already happening in Syria. The 15-month uprising has grown into a full-scale civil war. Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad is pushing on with his crackdown against rebel strongholds. Now it seems he may be getting more help from Syria's most important ally.
We are concerned about the latest information we have that there are attack helicopters on the way from Russia to Syria, which will escalate the conflict quite dramatically.
The United Nations has also listed Syria in its list of shame for the first time. The list of names includes countries that kill, recruit, or sexually assault children during armed conflicts. The UN describes some of the atrocities being done to kids.
We have children as young as 14 years old in detention being tortured by government forces with marks visibly on their bodies. We have seen children, they've described to my technical team, of being beaten, of being scarred by cigarette burns and whipped with electrical cables. Cases of sexual torture were also recorded against these children. So the torture of children in detention is something quite horrific. In addition, we have evidence of children being used as human shields.
Joining us this morning, Pamela Falk, CBS News Foreign Affairs analyst. Pam, good morning to you.
Good morning, Terrell.
These are horrific accounts of abuse to children. They are awful. And also hearing of these children being used as human shields now. Does this change the international community's involvement in this crisis?
Well, it does call for some kind of intervention, but military intervention seems to be out. What you're hearing from the High Commissioner is a call to the UN to refer this to the International Criminal Court so that the Assad regime is held accountable. But what we're also seeing is schools being converted into military bases, kids being used as human shields, and the paramilitary, the militias, going house to house and slitting kids' throats. I mean, it is as horrific as anyone has seen, which is making comparisons to either the Sierra Leone conflict or Bosnia, where the world did not want to, as a unit, intervene, but NATO had to. And that's what people are thinking, that something has to change. What you're hearing from the UK today was lifting the arms embargo on the rebels so that the rebels can be armed, and that's a European Union embargo. The UN has never passed an arms embargo. The linchpin here really is Russia, and they're blocking any international effort.
Oh, well, let's talk about Russia, since you bring them up, and talking about Russia, maybe even supplying weapons to the Syrian government, maybe even attack helicopters. This is a country that has actually wanted no foreign intervention in this conflict. What is Russia's stance?
Well, Russia is intervening indirectly, and that's what this has become, is a proxy war. And Russia is supplying, according to the Secretary of State, military attack helicopters. And for the first time ever this week, those have been seen from the ground. And that's really what's going on, is small towns all over are being attacked, and that's because the rebels have taken control of some of the territory and the military is trying to get it back. This has become a civil war that has implications for war crimes because it has a kick-in to the Geneva Conventions. Not that any of that would matter until it got to a court. But what it really means is that there might be some pressure that President Obama can bring to bear on Vladimir Putin, when he sees him next week in Mexico.
Moscow says any arms it's sending are not being used against civilians. Is there any way to prove that?
Yes, there will be ways to prove it, and that's what people are starting to gather if they can get near these sites. And the other big news of this week was that the UN observers are being attacked. That makes it very difficult to enforce if there ever were a ceasefire or to get evidence on what's going on. But they have seen these attack helicopters, and also the Syrian government is preventing the UN from using its own helicopters. A humanitarian corridor is what people are talking about. That also requires military action or some kind of aid. The refugees have gotten out of control. There are 27,000 that have gone into Turkey. Lebanon's borders are also being spilled into. And so this is really internationalizing the conflict. What is going to be required is Western Europe and the United States and the Saudi Arabia, other Gulf states, find a way to convince Russia, and in the alternative, to intervene to protect civilians.
The big question is what happens next? And we go back to that Annan peace plan. Where does that stand now?
That is failing. It's failing miserably. And his idea to build a contact group appears, at least on the surface, to have given Russia the sign that the West is weak. And so they're starting to create their own coalition of countries, including China and including several other countries on the Security Council, to politically oppose that contact group. The only hope would be that there's some way to convince Russia, and that's what you're starting to see on Capitol Hill, the idea of playing hardball with the Russians on trade, on other things.
It certainly will not be over anytime soon. CBS News Foreign Affairs analyst Pamela Falk. Pam, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Absolutely, Terrell.